Chapter 49-51. After the end of the Second Shinobi War, Tsunade left Konoha with her apprentice Shizune. God, were there so many old senile people grumbling about that particular thing. They all wanted her to be their personal healing tool. But she was fed up and left. In the middle of the council meeting, as they were all raving and raking at her, she just up and went away, consequences be damned. The council couldn't help but gape at her. Tsunade traveled to the Aim no Kuni, and she saw the results of the war. It was disheartening, really. She tried to heal anyone she could as she trained Shizune on the innumerable amounts of injuries there. The girl was shaping up quickly into a good medic. But Tsunade couldn't find any clue about the phenomenon she felt during the war. It was only when she was on her wit's end, she met in the market of one town a girl who told her a peculiar story about two kids who grew a tree. It ignited her hope and she instantly checked it out only to find Mokutan. It brought new hope to her life. Then, the problem started. She was dying. It took her years to find out what the discomfort was, but when the first symptoms started, she quickly understood. Her body was slowly starting to lose its ability to replenish her chakra. She didn't know why. She tried everything she knew, but nothing worked. Eventually, she accepted that her life in this world was coming to an abrupt end, but she refused to die before she met the two Mokutan users. Somehow even the thought of that made her seethe in rage and stubbornly continue her search no matter her condition. And so, Tsunade traveled all around Aim once again, trying to find more clues only to find nothing. At least her apprentice, Shizune, was shaping up good. She was 10 but already on the level of elite medic means of Konoha when it came to aerial ninjutsu. Tsunade could be proud of that. She left her medical legacy in the form of Shizune. In the end, Tsunade decided to briefly return to Konoha. She wanted to deposit Shizune back into the village and go on her last wild hunt across the Aim until the Reaper claimed her. But in a stroke of good luck, she could feel a tug. A slight tug on her chakra. When she focused, she found out it was pulling her somewhere. After she left Shizune in Konoha, she went to follow that tug as her instincts screamed at her to do so. It surprisingly led her to Mizuno Kuni of all places. Tsunade traveled all over the country following leads. She avoided only Kirigakure. It was frustrating, really. But finally, after years of traveling around Mizu in various disguises, dragging her utterly exhausted, chakra-depleted self through the towns of the humid country as she visibly aged by the day and her body ached, bones creaked, and muscles weakened. When she thought she would just drop dead on her feet, she finally saw the two figures that plagued her mind for years. She just could feel that it was them she was looking for. And her heart desired to be in their presence. She instantly approached them and her wish was fulfilled. She met them and was a nervous wreck due to it. Damn, she said the first thing that appeared in her mind. What, we need to talk. It was damn embarrassing. Senju Tsunade quivered in her boots. The sheer thought made her internally chuckle at her pathetic self. But as she gathered her courage to speak with them, her eyes landed on the man and she froze. Her heart desired to be held by that man. She didn't even know what or why, but she deeply wanted it. Before she could get her head out of the gutter, the man bent her over his shoulder and she, much to her eternal embarrassment, passed out due to the sheer exhaustion. Her body just shut out. And she remembered no more. Tsunade Senju fluttered her eyes open. Slowly, groggily, only to close them quickly. She moaned. Moaned from the sheer pleasure she felt. The feeling of being rested. She didn't feel at ease and rested for years. A cute yawn tore out of her throat and Tsunade's face split into a beautiful smile. She moaned again and giggled at the pleasant feeling of joy that filled her. This was heaven. Tsunade rolled her body, lying on her side, her cheek burying into the lap of weight. She snapped her eyes open and if not for the firm hands that held her body down, she would have jumped to her feet. Her wide, shocked eyes looked in front of her as she regained her clarity. She saw. Hey! That name sprang up in her mind almost instantly even though she was sure they never introduced themselves to each other. Ray chuckled at the deer in the headlights expression Tsunade showed. She was madly blushing and he couldn't resist and put his hand on her cheek, stroking it slightly. He chuckled again when his little affection earned him a satisfied moan from Tsunade, making her even more embarrassed as he continued stroking her cheek. How do you feel? He asked her tenderly. I feel. Tsunade's breath hitched. She felt amazing. Young. Energetic. Strong. She felt alive. Tears welled in her eyes and started to stream down her cheeks. The only thing she could hear was the cooing voice of Ray as she bawled her eyes out into his shirt. Don't worry, you are alive. Safe. Rei whispered to the distraught woman as he stroked her hair. Tsunade curled into him, her loud wails resounding through the dimension. When her tears were finally exhausted, Tsunade looked again at Rei. What happened? She asked him quietly, sniffing. How come I am alive? Well, you see? Rei started explaining the bond and their current situation with an awkward expression. Hearing everything, Tsunade mulled over it. She was now bound to a ninja from Kiri. It was baffling, but she spent years trying to find him. She would not be deterred by a little setback like this. She was a Senju. Senju didn't back down. I understand. Her expression turned to steeled and determined one. I will defect for you, then. For her it was a foregone conclusion. If she couldn't keep Konoha and Rei at the same time, she had to choose what was more important to her. Tsunade saw Rei's jaw drop at her statement and the casual way she said it. Both knew she meant every word thought. No, you will not. Rei recollected himself and admonished, putting his index finger to her lips, stopping any and all protests. Just then a blue-haired woman with a slight smile came closer to them. Conan. Tsunade's mind supplied. Tsunade returned the smile as she couldn't help but feel happy at seeing the unknown woman. Conan was the same. She decided to be good to Tsunade, but it was astonishing that Tsunade's mere presence brought her joy. To a lesser degree than Rei's, but it was still noticeable. This is... Rei started introductions. Conan. Tsunade interrupted as her lips curled into a calm smile. Nice to meet you. Conan stated and Tsunade nodded. Both women looked at Rei intently. If I won't defect from Konoha, how could I stay with you? Tsunade asked but then blinked as her eyes grew horrified. I can't be separated from you. She shouted desperately. Rei showed a mysterious smile. We will do it like this? The Mizukichi stared at Rei while Rei stared at the Mizukichi. It was an epic stare-down of two wills clashing, neither backing down. She is my slave. He exclaimed shamelessly. The Mizukichi blinked and gave a fed-up look at the blonde-haired around 60-years-old woman with a wrinkled face who promptly snorted at Rei's proclamation. Conan was as always, completely stoic and uncaring about his suffering too. He slowly put his elbows on the desk and started to rub his forehead, trying to prevent his growing headache. Ah, it's that time of the month again, I see. The Mizukichi mentally sighed. The Mizukichi let out and then took a deep breath. He leisurely leaned back into his comfortable fluffy chair, sighing in relief. After a few moments of enjoying the pleasant softness on his back, he again looked at Rei, Conan, and the mysterious old woman with them. Nodding to himself, he leaned down and opened a drawer. Slowly, he took out his precious smoking pipe, putting it in the middle of his table, right in front of him. He looked at Rei's group for 5 seconds straight and again nodded to himself as if reassuring his own mind that he is not hallucinating. He reached to the drawer again and took out his special weed from the land of grass. It was a luxury good for very special occasions. At least, until Rei started going to missions. From then on it became a stress relief and helped to forget. Sigh, being Mizukichi is a hard job, man. The Mizukichi wistfully thought. He again looked at Rei's group as he blinked a few times and slowly put his hands into a hand seal. Rei could swear he heard a quiet kai, before seeing the Mizukichi nod to himself again. The Mizukichi, now doubly sure this was really happening, took out a sake bottle from his drawer and put it next to his pipe. He leaned back into his seat and took the pipe into his mouth, chewing on its tip. Anbu, get out. He lazily drawled in a I don't care anymore tone. The Anbu hesitated. Not because they were afraid for the safety of Mizukichi. Not because of their duty. Nothing so grand. They hesitated because they would miss the entire show, damn it. Now? The Mizukichi ordered and the reluctant, scowling Anbu vacated the room. The Mizukichi chilled in his chair, looking between his special weed and his very expensive sake as if he couldn't decide if he should get drunk or high. His senses still worked though, and with the corner of his eye, he noticed that only the old blonde-haired woman gave him a knowing sympathetic look. Sigh, she clearly knew his woes. Drunk or high, that's the question. Suddenly, he felt it wouldn't be that bad giving her citizenship. After all, she clearly could relate to his problems. With a sigh, the Mizukichi started speaking, without lifting his gaze from the sake and weed as he curled the tip of his mustache in his hand. Rei, remember that mission 2 years ago where you somehow, and never let me know how or I swear I will use it on you, not hinged but outright transformed your fat noblewoman of a client into a small ball of wool to escape your pursuers since she was too fat to run? The Mizukichi dryly chuckled to himself. Hee, Rei chuckled at the image. I am sorry, Mizukuji-sama. I am afraid that was a long time ago. Long ago, heh? Indeed. Let me refresh your memory. You somehow forgot her still transformed on the porch of her own house, and her cat has strewn the wool all over the porch and the garden. It took 2 whole days to get her back into the ball and transform her back into human form. Since then, I give you escort missions only when you are the last possible choice. The Mizukuji lifted his gaze and saw the confused look in Rei's eyes. I see. You forgot? He concluded and took yet another deep breath, and his eyes went back to the weed as he smiled and stuffed a bit into his pipe. Or that mission 1.5 years ago where you were tasked to deliver a package to a certain building and you delivered it too fast. The one where it was a bomb that due to your speed blew up with our informant still inside? Poor bastard won't ever have children. The Mizukuji puffed on his pipe and chuckled. That was not my fault. True. Nobody thought you would deliver it that fast. Since then I never gave you another delivery mission. Rings of smoke came from the carefree-looking Mizukuji with a big lazy smile plastered on his face. Oh. Or that one. Where you were sent to interrogate a guy in TNI a year prior. Damn, you somehow made him catch dementia, heh? To be fair, I was there to interrogate him. Not coddle him. Hey, keep it. The Mizukuji nodded in affirmative. Since then I gave you no interrogation or torture missions. The Mizukuji smiled in reminiscence. Now, we have a similar discussion almost every 2 months. God forbid, I think it gets more and more frequent. So, Rei, tell me. How long did you study the law book to come with the excuse of her being your slave? The Mizukuji's smile changed into a curious one as he puffed on his pipe, but his eyes were not on Rei and the women. He was too busy pouring himself a drink from his expensive sake. Around 30 minutes or so. Rei scratched his cheek. But slavery is totally legal here. I see, yes, it is legal. If you are noble. The Mizukuji calmly stated, taking a sip from his cup. Oh. Hey Blinkid. Then his demeanor completely changed and he gave a pleasant smile to Mizukuji. Mizukuji-sama, you misunderstood. I meant to say she is the new babysitter for Mei. Tsunade couldn't and burst into giggles as even Konan averted her head and covered her snickers with her palm. Tsunade came forward and bowed slightly. Mizukuji-sama, I am nothing much but I know some medical jutsu. I may help in the hospital. The Mizukuji squinted his eyes at her. What's your name again? Tsunade gave him a sickly sweet smile with mischievously closed eyes. I am Sunayatsuba. The Mizukuji instantly did a spit take, covering the documents on his table in it. No, my paperwork, was his first thought. Shit. I wasted my expensive sake, was his second thought. Wait, did she just say Atsuba? Was his third thought that froze his mind. He looked at the old wrinkled woman and gave a sheepish Rei an unamused stare. Here I am showering the guy in young, firm, juicy, healthy, strong, gorgeous kunoichi and he takes an old woman as his wife? The Mizukuji wanted to bang his head on the table as he heard Rei's bashful tee-hee-hee. He laid lifelessly on his table and could almost see his soul leaving him. You know what? Do what you want, punk. Just don't cause any more trouble, I beg you. Anime tears streamed from his eyes. Wow, he is really Mizukuji. Tsunade thought as she watched the eye waterfalls completely soak the full stack of finished paperwork with mirth in her gaze as the man didn't yet notice the catastrophe his tears were causing. Rei and the company left the office as Himino entered. Remind me, why don't I just save myself the trouble and offer them defection without being pursued? The Mizukuji grumbled childishly. Because they are S-rank ninja, silly. Himino giggled. Right? Himino suddenly stopped in her tracks and robotically turned to Mizukuji. You smoked? Himino hated it when he smoked. Long ago he promised not to, on the pains of months on the couch Kuin. A fate worse than death. Himino? It's just your imagination, ahaha. He awkwardly rubbed the back of his head as he tried to hide his weed. You? Himino looked sweetly at him and the Mizukuji did the only thing he could. He slowly slid towards the window, slid it open and jumped out, running for his life. Damnam you. I blame you. He tearfully thought as he evaded sharp ice spikes. Rei, Konan, and Tsunade sat around the table in Rei's apartment, waiting for Mei to come from the academy. Was it smart to reveal your medical ninjutsu? Rei asked Tsunade, not really caring. Tsunade shrugged with a slight smile. She was in her young, normal form without any transformation. Conan told her that she trusts this May person, so she would too. The entire apartment was filled with privacy seals no ninja in Kiri would be able to bypass, so it was safe. I revealed my ability to use it. Not the extent. My chakra is looking like a low Chunin level thanks to your hiding technique too. As long as I don't use anything too advanced, I will be fine. I did it mostly so I can protect myself if I am ever attacked. We wouldn't want a complete civilian defeating ninja, now, would we? Tsunade chuckled and took Rei's hand into hers, playing with his fingers with a slight self-indulgent smile. Fair enough, Tsu. Rei nodded, making Tsunade blush at the affectionate nickname. I also wouldn't want to freeload. She trailed off only to have her shoulder swatted by Conan. You are one of us. Just accept it. Conan reproachfully stated, making Tsunade lower her head, showing her understanding, and Conan pecked her cheek for that. Good girl. Tsunade internally squealed. It was so embarrassing. She was the strongest kunoichi of Konoha, and here, she was being verbally juggled by two kids younger than her. But, she wanted to feel Rei's and Conan's affection. She wanted them to tease her. Tsunade abruptly raised her head in a realization as she stared at Rei and Conan in utter shock at the idea of her having these feelings. Not once in her life did she actually feel like this. Conan tilted her head when she noticed Tsunade's state and distraught. I love you. Tsunade blurted out. Damn, I love you. She blinked, not really knowing how to react. Rei put his finger on her lips with a smirk, silencing her. Tsunade looked at him and her eyes morphed into acceptance. Wanting to be near them and outright loving them without even knowing why, that was a very big jump and it would need a long time for Tsunade to fully accept it. But for now, she wouldn't deceive herself. Her lips stretched into a gentle bashful smile. Seeing it, Rei leaned forward and fully kissed Tsunade on her lips, startling her. Her hands quickly shot to Rei's shoulders, but she didn't want to push. Her hands became powerless as they laid on his shoulders while he played with her tongue, and Tsunade just gave in. Her arms snaked around Rei's mouth and pulled him closer. Rei's hands took hold of Tsunade's cheeks and the two made out for minutes while Conan watched with an amused smile. She supported her chin with her hands, elbows on the table as she enjoyed the happy tingling on her lips. She could feel the sweet taste of Tsunade on them as well as the familiar taste of Rei, and it was a very peculiar feeling. She was only a bit rueful that it was such a delicate feeling she barely perceived it. Rei and Tsunade separated as Tsunade had a bright, satisfied face with a dreamy smile. That was nice. She giggled with a content sigh. It was the first real kiss she received. Glad to hear that, Tsu. Rei chuckled and licked his lips. You're sweet. Tsunade gulped at that simple compliment. She couldn't help but feel herself getting hot as her mouth filled with saliva and her eyes intently stared at Rei. She bit her lower lip to not blurt out the first thing on her mind. Cute too. Conan snickered, making Tsunade blush even more, her face now nearing scarlet. Moo. Tsunade let out a whiny sound and averted her eyes to the side as she pouted while petulantly crossing her arms on her chest and sullenly sniffing. Conan and Rei secretly high-fived under the table with smug smirks as they exchanged subtle knowing looks. I am just a little sorry that you will have to wear that transformation technique. Rei refocused on Tsunade and sighed, making Tsunade gently shake her head. No. It's all right. Using it to appear old while I am young is much better than using it to appear young when you are actually old. Both Conan and Rei smiled at her. They had to admit she had a point. It must have been hell to travel the land of water with a body nearing 2 centuries of age. Well, after I finish the seal for our bond stabilization, you will be able to spend time in our dimension. Rei said, and Tsunade perked up. She really loved the nature energy-filled place. It felt oddly calming to her. Her senju senses were all tingling. Just then the door opened and in walked Mei. She ran and embraced Rei while greeting Conan, but her eyes stopped at Tsunade. Both stared at each other quietly, and Rei was getting awkward as the atmosphere was getting heavier and heavier. The sparks could be almost seen flying between them. They both exclaimed at once. Mei looked at Conan, her expression openly asking who the blonde woman was. She knew she would probably get someone to look after her when Conan and Rei were away. Even Conan told her as much, and they expected it to be some Kiri diehard loyalist, aka dipshit, so she was getting mentally ready for it. She is Tsunayotsuba, Rei's second wife? Conan playfully quipped with a devilish smile, and Rei froze. He could feel Mei's hold around his waist getting tighter and tighter as Mei's head snapped to Tsunade, and her look was getting stormier and stormier by the second. She was visibly pouting as she glared at Tsunade, who enjoyed the spectacle immensely and taunted Mei with a winning smile. The girl was adorable, indeed. She felt they would get along smashingly. Don't tease her, Conan. Ray ruffled Mei's hair with twitching lips and stood up as he tried to restrain himself from grinning. I am going to cook something up. He was about to step through the door into the kitchen when he heard Mei stomp her foot on the floor with a huff. He turned around and saw Mei intently looking at him, one hand pointing her index finger directly at him while the other was pressed on her hip as she gnashed her teeth at him. I will become your wife too. Count on it. Mei loudly exclaimed with a determined look as both Tsunade and Conan snickered into their palms. Ray knew that look. It was the horrible, horrible look of a woman that made her mind and won't budge. He better ran to the kitchen after he gave her a helpless shrug. He was only glad there was no databeo in that statement. He would let the girls talk among themselves and get to know each other. Especially Tsunade and Mei, as these two would spend a lot of time with each other. He only hoped Tsunade would be a better idol for her than Conan. One Conan-like person was enough in his life. He really didn't crave more of that personality. And who knows, maybe Tsunade would talk Mei out of it? He thought. Oh, he had no idea how far from the truth that was. Tsunade would be a very positive influence, all right.